Guys, there are too many weapon unlocks in TF2. What do you think about that then? Triggered yet? I hope so. What's up guys, how's it going? Toofty here, and today we're talking about weapon unlocks. So, you've already heard it. Number one, I think there are too many unlocks in TF2. I'd love to hear if a lot of people agree with me there, or if I'm absolutely in the minority. There's so many weapons that are really gimmicky or just marginally different. And that's the one that really annoys me. The ones that are just like, oh, 5% buff here, minus a crit here, jobs are good and you got a new weapon. No, that's a waste of time if you ask me. A good weapon unlock is about creating new play styles. That's the key for me. There are unlocks that have tweaks and might make you play more efficiently in a certain way. That is something I'm not interested in. I do think that probably is going to be controversial, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I want a weapon unlock to be drastic. If they're going to add some buffs and nerfs, I want them to be pretty mental. I don't want just like a minus 10% here, plus 10% there. I want like, say the two variables we're talking about are say, I don't know, damage and movement speed. If they're just both slightly tweaked, you know, it's just not that interesting. I want one to be whacked up massive and one to be reduced down massive, or vice versa. Whatever it is, you know, that's just an example. That probably doesn't even make any sense. I want big, bold concepts that change the core playstyle and radically change the class you are playing. I'm going to talk about some examples in a sec. I had an idea to do something really interesting where I'd actually take all the weapons of the Demoman and basically kind of judge them from my point of view as to whether they are creating a new playstyle and are an interesting concept, or they're just, you know, tweaks, and to be honest, I wish they didn't really exist. But before we do that, let's jump into what I think are the absolute epitome of a weapon unlock. For me, of course, this is all based on opinion. I had a quick look through all the weapons you can get, and my absolute, probably favourite three, possibly in this order, are number one, the Gunslinger. Boom, you've got another class there. You've got Battle Engie. It's awesome. It completely changes how you're playing. You're running around. I remember when it first came out and I was like, what? Taking away an Engineer's Sentry? It will never catch on. But here I am today, folks, singing its praise. It's a beautiful weapon. I love it. Yeah, like I said, it just splits Engie down the middle. You can now play him in two completely different ways. Number two, now I'm having to build up a lot of courage to say this, but it's basically the Demo Knight. I'm not a massive fan of playing Demo Knight, and they're well annoying when you come up against a good one and they sort of charge at you and kill you and you just freaking punch you in the face. They can be a little bit frustrating, but there's no denying it. That is a completely different playstyle, and it is a lot of fun to a lot of people. It's fun, it's completely different, because that's the number one important thing here is, you know, it's all about enjoyment rather than just those slight tweaks I talked about before. And I'll come to some more kind of bad examples in a second. Number three for me would be the Huntsman. You now have two snipers. You have one that hit scans and one that uses projectiles. It's beautiful. Possibly not the most valid class in TF2, but you know, definitely a lot of fun. I enjoy playing him. Good laugh. If I'm trying to win, I might not play him, sure, but you know, definitely good fun to play around with. So there's my top three. I think, you know, there are some other ones that were definitely high contenders, like the Rescue Ranger. Beautiful weapon. It doesn't necessarily completely change the playstyle, but it does to some extent, and it just gives so much more flexibility and freedom to the engineer. Something like the Direct Hit, again, it tweaks the playstyle, but a decent amount, you know, so I think it's a really good one, and maybe that's on, you know, that's on the fence. It's difficult to tell where you draw the line with these things, but something like the Direct Hit I think is a really good, solid unlock. And one of the reasons is it's actually because it's really simple. It's dead simple. It's like, you're going to have to try and get direct hits, that's it. So we're going to buff the speed of the projectiles and the damage on hit and stuff like that. So it's just, you know, dead simple concept. There's no faffing about with silly little percentages here and there, you know. Okay, so let's look at some bad examples. Now there's plenty to choose from, in my opinion, and I imagine there's going to be fans of every single weapon in this game, so whatever I choose, you know, you're going to rage your faces off, and I kind of expect that, that's fine. But what I thought I'd do is I'd pick one class, and I'm even going to go as far as picking one of his weapon types. So I'm going to look at the melee. So let's take a look at Sniper. Let's look at his melee weapons. I'm going to ignore all the ones that are just skins, that's cool, no problem there. But I'm on the wiki, I'm at the bottom of the kind of table here, and there's three knives. We've got the Tribalman's Shiv, the Bushwhacker, and the Shahanshah. I said that in one take, and that is skills right there. These are the kind of weapons that don't do a lot for me. Maybe they're not all as bad as each other, but let's start with the bottom one, the Shahanshah Papa, the Shafluppifla, the Shahanshah. I don't think I've ever had to say that before. There we go. Plus 25% increase in damage when health is less than 50% of max. Minus 25% decrease in damage when health is more or equal to 50% of max. It's just a bit situational, isn't it? I know you've got the soldier's escape plan, and that is very well used, and it's not really changing your playstyle much. It's more adding that tiny additional utility to the class and just removing something that, to be honest, doesn't quite balance it out. That's one of those things that a lot of people think is potentially unbalanced, but I'm kind of digressing here. But the Shahansha, for example, it's just like your life is not going to change. You're going to play sniper, the exact same way you did before, and sometimes you're going to do a bit more damage, and sometimes you're going to do a bit less damage, and it's like, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but it just feels like a kind of a waste of time. And let's move up to the Bushwhacker. Crits where it would normally mini crit. Lovely. Raises damage vulnerability by 20% when active. No random crits. Again, I immediately forget when I read them through, and I immediately forget what they even are because it's just so insubstantial to me, it feels. Finally, the Tribalman's Shiv. Now this is slightly more interesting. I've played about with it myself. It's alright. I don't actually mind this too much, but still it could kind of not exist and it wouldn't bother me too much. Maybe some of you guys will disagree with me here, but on hit, causes bleed for 6 seconds, deals 50% less damage. So good for spies, right? That's pretty much the gist of it, but not gonna really change your playstyle much at all. So yeah, there's some kind of good and bad examples that make sense to me. Let me know if you disagree with any of those. Now I wanted to do something kind of interesting and actually look at the Demoman in particular. So for this exercise, I've actually kind of put the Demonite to one side because I said he's awesome. I do think there are too many variations of the Demoman in my opinion. 3 shields, there's 4 swords I believe. I think you could probably narrow that down quite a bit, but I'm going to put that all to one side just for the sake of time. We're going to look at the main, primary and secondary weapons for the Demoman and go through in order. And I'm going to briefly explain kind of my opinions around each one. So the lock and load. Now this is kind of borderline for me. It's very much like the direct hit, basically it's the Demoman's equivalent. So yeah, I think it kind of gets away with being something that I guess is worth existing, if you see what I mean. But for me, if you wanted to say focus on getting direct hits, you could kind of do that with the stock grenade launcher, if you see what I mean. You'll be a bit more successful with this, but don't know, I'm kind of on the fence. But I'm going to put it slightly more towards this end of this little graph I've made. So, number 2, the Iron Bomber. Oh boy, I can only apologise for the words I'm about to say. It's a lovely weapon, but it definitely sits for me in the category of tiny little tweaks that make your gameplay slightly more efficient, but it just really isn't very interesting for me. It's not a game changer. Maybe you'll learn to use it and put out a bit more damage in some situations, but really it feels like it could kind of not exist. It feels like not a big deal, and there are definitely worse examples out there, but definitely sits on this end of the graph for me. So number 3 is the loose cannon. Now this is a winner for me, and that is because it's just a lot of fun and you use it completely differently to your regular stock grenade launcher. Simple as that. Is it practical? Yeah, I think it probably is in some situations, but that's really not the point for me. It's about new playstyles, like I said, and this definitely provides that. And of course, just having some fun, and it definitely provides that too. So let's move on to the sticky bomb launchers now. Number 1, the Scottish Resistance. I'm trying really hard to not be biased and just kind of dismiss something because I don't ever use it. This, to be fair, is aimed at playing more defensively and setting up traps, so I can kind of see that. But like I said before, I would like the changes to be slightly more dramatic. I guess the problem here is if you make changes more dramatic, it gets a lot harder to balance. Again, this is a hard one, but I would put it slightly towards this end of the graph. You can see kind of what they're trying to do there. They are trying to make a new playstyle. So let's jump over to the Quickie Bomb Launcher. Now again, quite a popular weapon. Just going to watch my subscriber count decrease there. For me, the changes are too subtle, basically. I did a weapon concept video for Demoman once, and a few guys were like, that's exactly like the Quickie Bomb Launcher, but I think what they didn't realise is in my head, the weapon I'd come up with was so much more drastic. For example, my concept was actually remove the fuse time completely, rather than just like decrease it by a fraction of a second. Remove it completely, because that is basically as extreme as you can go in that direction. And then from there, simply adjust the damage and the speed until it becomes balanced again. Anyway, so yeah, this is another one that, although it's a lovely weapon and it can be used very efficiently and works really well, this is another one I'm afraid I'm going to have to put over here. The Sticky Jumper. For a while I thought this was essentially just for practicing, but the more I've used it, the more I've actually found that it can be almost viable. And I say almost because stickies are so important. If you're actually trying to win and you're playing properly, stickies are irreplaceable. But if you're playing for fun, that tends to be what I'm doing, yeah, definitely this is an awesome choice and will make you play completely differently. You're flying around the map, shooting pipes all over the gaff, having a good time. So that's why I like this one. It makes you play differently. So Demoman has a few other bits and bobs. He has the pain train, which is just, for me, this kind of just sums up the problem. Sure, in a competitive game, you might equip it, to get a surprise cap on last on process or whatever. But really, I mean, you're playing exactly the same. You're just trying to do some sneaky little tactic or be slightly more efficient in a tiny little way. It's the one thing I don't really like about these weapon unlocks, summarized in a weapon. 1+ capture rate, 10% bullet damage vulnerability on wearer. I don't like the fact that it's kind of bitty as well as specific. You have to remember that, oh, I'm vulnerable to bullets, not explosive damage. I like things that are simple. It's like damage full stop is increased or reduced or what have you. The more bitty it is, the more complex it is, the more it feels kind of forced and not a great idea, more of just a jumble of ideas kind of mushed together, if you see what I mean. Finally, the Ullapool Caber. It's a bit of fun. Let's be honest, you don't really play with that too seriously, so I'll leave that one. And the Base Jumper. Now, I think that's more for Soldier, but it was kind of harmless to, release it for Demoman 2, so I'm going to, again, leave that one for now. But yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about the list of weapons I've just been through? Like I said, it's really difficult to draw the line. There are loads that kind of sit in that grey area, and you could argue, why not have more weapons? They're harmless, and if it makes one guy have more fun, then why not? But it kind of clutters, it clutters my backpack, but it also clutters my mind. I'm thinking like, I like simplicity, and I don't know. I'd like to be able to have 2 or 3 options for Demoman, for instance, and them to be significantly different. None of these tiny little complex changes that don't really change anything really. If I wanted to end with this, that it kind of feels like it's Valve trying to fulfill certain expectations from the community. I feel like the community really pressure Valve into releasing new stuff, and sometimes maybe they have to lower the bar. I don't know, that seems harsh, but like they feel like they have to release something, and so they just release stuff. And I don't know, I'm probably on my own, but I would kind of prefer if there was slightly less stuff to choose from. That's a really weird thing to want, but I don't know why, it's just kind of my opinion. So I wanted to talk about this one for ages, so I'm glad I've got around to doing it. Please let me know in the comments below. 1, am I going crazy? Do you disagree with me? 2, are there any weapons that you just think are a complete waste of space? Or do you think any of the weapons I've gone through I'm completely wrong on? Let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.